All right, we are live again today. I just finished up streaming about React on Free Code Camp, and I'm just gonna keep trucking through. I would love to. I might try to have this whole front-end library certification done this weekend, depending on what comes up. Got a lot of crazy stuff going on in life right now, but just taking advantage of these snippets of time I have to get through some learning. So I have used Redux before, just a little bit. I'm really not good at it, and so I'm hoping that this series in Free Code Camp will help me maybe understand it a little bit better and actually think of some ways that I could use it in other projects moving forward. So let's get started. I think I'm coming through okay. Looks like my levels are good. So we're gonna create a Redux store. So let's see what they want to do with that. Redux is a state management framework that can be used with a number of different web technologies, including React. In Redux, there's a single state object that's responsible for the entire state of your application. This means if you had a React app with 10 components and each component had its own local state, the entire state of your app would be defined by a single state object housed in the Redux store. This is the first important principle to understand when learning Redux. The Redux store is the single source of truth when it comes to application state. This also means that anytime any piece of your app wants to update state, it must do so through the Redux store. The unidirectional data flow makes it easier to track state management in your app. This is exactly why I have used it. I ran into a scenario where we had components that were like way down, like nested way down into a bigger component, and the data coming through needed to be updated basically all the way up to this top level component. And so doing that, this was before the state hooks and all that. So now that there's use state and things of that nature, there's not as much of I mean, there is a need for Redux and it has its place, but there's kind of, I guess, not as much of a need. You don't necessarily have to jump on it immediately as soon as you are looking for something to do this for you. So let's see what they say here. There's a method called createStore on the Redux object, which you use to create the Redux store. This method takes a reducer function as a required argument. The reducer function is covered in a later challenge. So we have our reducer method already, and it looks like they just want us to create the store like this, and looks like that might be all we need to do for this one. Oh, not at all. Let's see, Redux store should exist. Redux store should have a value of 5 for the state. Well, the reducer already has a value of 5 in it, so what am I missing here? Declare a store variable and assign it to the oh, I see. Is that all they needed? There you go, cool. Good deal. Get state from Redux store. The Redux store object provides several methods that allow you to interact with it. For example, you can retrieve the current state held in the Redux store object with the get state method. The code from the previous challenge is rewritten more concisely in the code editor. Use store.getState to retrieve the state from the store. I see. So they've basically just taken their reducer function and passed it directly into the createStore method that we just used and assigned it to the store constant. So it looks like I should just be able to call store.getState, and it's going to return a 5 maybe, or is it going to return, let's see, state should exist, variable. The variable of current state should exist and should be assigned. Oh, right. I need a new variable called current state. Cool. It's a bummer that I'm assuming they're going to do this later, but it's a bummer they're not like logging these values out. Since Redux is a state management framework, updating state is one of its core tasks. In Redux, all state updates are triggered by dispatching actions. An action is simply a JavaScript object that contains information about an action and an action event that has occurred. The Redux store receives these action objects, then updates its state accordingly. Sometimes a Redux action also carries some data. For example, the action carries a username after a user logs in. While the data is optional, actions must carry a type property that specifies the type of action that occurred. Think of Redux actions as messengers that deliver information about events happening in your app to the Redux store. The store then conducts the business of updating state based on the action that occurred. All right, writing a Redux action is as simple as declaring an object with a type property. Declare an object action. All right, let's declare an object, call it action, give it a type property, and set the type to all caps, login. Is that it? It's taking a while to run this test. There you go. All right, define an action creator. After creating an action, the next step is sending the action to the Redux store so it can update state. In Redux, you define action creators to accomplish this. An action creator is simply a JavaScript function that returns an action. In other words, action creators create objects that represent action events. Define a function named action creator that returns the action object when called. Okay. Come on. It's lagging. Wake up. There you go. All right, so we've got an action creator, function, oh my gosh, function, action, creator, and that returns the action. Is that it? Oh, returns, there you go. All right, dispatch method is what you use to dispatch actions to the Redux store. Calling store.dispatch and passing the value returned from an action creator sends an action back to the store. Okay, recall that the action creator returns an object with a type property that specifies the action that has occurred. Then the method dispatches an action object to the Redux store based on the previous challenges example. The following lines are equivalent in both dispatch the action of type login. Gotcha. The Redux store in the code editor has an initialized state that's an object containing a login property currently set to false. We see that here. So state equals, and it's an object login set to false. The Redux store, let's see, there's also an action creator called login action, which returns an action type of login. Dispatch the login action to call in the login action, which returns this type login object. And is that all I need? Should be used to dispatch an action of type login. Okay, so it just dispatched a login type action. And now we need to handle an action. So we sent all of that. We sent an action, but there's no way for the Redux store to know what it needs to do when it receives that action. And so now we're creating a reducer function, it looks like. Reducer takes state and action as arguments, and it always returns a new state. It is important to see that this is the only role of the reducer. It has no side effects. It never calls an API endpoint, and it never has any hidden surprises. The reducer is simply a pure function that takes state and action, then returns a new state. Another key principle in Redux is that state is read-only. In other words, the reducer function must always return a new copy of the state and never modify the state directly. Redux does not enforce state immutability. However, you are responsible for enforcing it in the code of your reducer functions. You'll practice this in later challenges. The code editor has the previous example as well as the start of a reducer function for you. Fill in the body of the reducer function so that if it receives an action of type login, it returns a state object with login set to true. Otherwise, it returns the current state. Note that the current state and dispatched action are passed to the reducer so that you can access the actions type directly with action.type. Okay, login action, default state, create store, and then we're going to do a reducer that takes the action.type, and if this equals login, they just want to do something like this. If action type equals login, then we set the state equal to login true. Or really, we could just do this. Turn. I think we can just do this. Action.type equals login. Maybe not. Yeah, cool. So you can just basically say, since the reducer just has to return the new state, like we don't know, we're not actually checking anything with the state for this simple example. There might be something where you need to like see if they're already logged in and do something differently. But in this case, they just said that we needed to check if it's logged in. So we can just literally set the login property to the value of action.type equals login, which would be true because that's the action that's getting sent in. Use a switch statement to handle multiple actions. You can tell the Redux store how to handle multiple action types. Say you're managing a user authentication in the Redux store. You want to have a state representation for when users are logged in and when they are logged out. You represent this with a single state property with the property authenticated. You also need action creators that create actions corresponding to user login and user logout, along with the action objects themselves. The code editor has a store actions and action creator set up for you. Fill in the reducer function to handle multiple authentication actions. Use a JavaScript switch statement in the reducer to respond to different action events. This is a standard pattern in writing Redux reducers. The switch statement should switch over action.type and return the appropriate authentication state. Note, at this point, don't worry about state immutability since it is small and simple in this example. For each action, you can return a new object. For example, authenticated true. Also, don't forget to write a default case in your switch statement that returns the current state. This is important because once your app has multiple reducers, they will all run anytime any action is made, even when the action isn't related to the reducer. That's good to know. So you have to make sure it returns a default state. So we're going to go ahead and create a switch statement. We're going to pass in the action.type, and then we'll start writing our cases. And we know one case is log in. We'll return a new state object, and we'll create a second case, which is log out, and we will return our new return another one, and then we'll have our default, and that will return state. And then for our log out, we will set return authenticated to false and authenticated to true. So log in, return authenticated true, log out, authenticated false. Cool. Easy peasy. All right, use consts for action types. A common practice when working with Redux is to assign action types as read-only constants. Then reference these constants wherever they are used. You can refactor code you're working on to write the action types as const declarations. So let's see. They already had these as const declarations, no? Or are they just saying that? Is to assign action types as read-only constants. Interesting. I'm confused about this. Declare login and logout as const values. Oh, I see. So they're saying like const login equals login. Is that what they're saying? And const logout equals logout. Respectively. Then edit the auth reducer. I guess I need to probably put these up here. Right where it says change code below this line. I guess I could read. Okay, and then basically we just need to get rid of all of these guys and reference the thing directly. Is that it? Oh, the action creators and reducer should reference login and logout. Const. Okay, so the action creators also need to. Oops. I see. So they're just saying, basically we do this so that there isn't any chance that these values are going to be different between these two. Because when you do a string, you use a string in two places, it could possibly be messed up in one of them. Cool. Submit. Register as store listener. Another method you have access to on the Redux store object is the store.subscribe. This allows you to subscribe listener functions to the store, which are called whenever an action is dispatched against the store. One simple use for this method is to subscribe a function to your store that simply logs messages every time an action is received and the store is updated. Write a callback function that increments the global value variable count every time the store receives an action, and pass this function to store.subscribe, the store.subscribe method. Console log count. Okay. Count is a global variable. We've got a reducer. Action is add, and the add will. Dispatching. What's going on here? Store. Oh, I see. I'm not subscribed, so it's just going to show that right now it's always going to be 0 every time because this count isn't subscribed. But it looks like I can do store.subscribe. A callback function increments the global variable count every time the store receives an action. And so I guess they didn't show this in an example, but I'm guessing I can pass a callback function here. Right? I don't know. Let's see. Count equals x dot, or x, it's just x. It's count plus 1. Maybe. Yeah, okay. So that seems complicated. I don't know why that seemed more like complicated than it actually was. So yeah, you can basically just say store.subscribe, you pass in a function here, and they're just saying increment this count every time it gets called to demonstrate that the subscribe is listening to these dispatches that are happening. Cool. Next up, combining multiple reducers. When the state of your app begins to grow more complex, it may be tempting to divide state into multiple pieces. Instead, remember the first principle of Redux. All app state is held in a single state object in the store. Therefore, Redux provides reducer composition as a solution for a complex state model. You define multiple reducers to handle different pieces of your application state and then compose these reducers together into one root reducer. The root reducer is then passed in the Redux create store method. In order to let us combine multiple reducers together, Redux provides the combine reducers method. This method accepts an object as an argument in which you define properties which associate keys to specific reducer functions. The name you give to these keys will be used by Redux as the name for the associated piece of state. Typically, it's a good practice to create a reducer for each piece of application state when they are distinct or unique in some way. For example, in a note-taking app with user authentication, one reducer could handle authentication while another handles the text and notes that that user is submitting. For such an application, we might write the combine reducers method like this. So we have a root reducer, we run redux.combine reducers with an object, and we assign the authentication reducer to the auth property and the notes reducer to the notes property. All right. There are counter reducer and auth reducer functions provided in the code editor along with the Redux store. Finish writing the root reducer along with the Redux combine reducers method. Assign counter reducer to a key called count and auth reducer to a key called auth. All right, so where are we changing the code here? Define the root reducer here. So we call Redux dot combine reducers, and we want to have an auth and a count. Auth colon auth reducer count colon count reducer. Okay, good, nice. That's pretty easy. Send action data to the store. By now, you've learned how to dispatch actions to the Redux store, but so far these actions have not contained any information other than a type. You can also send specific data along with the actions. In fact, this is very common because actions usually originate from some user interaction and tend to carry some data with them. The Redux store often needs to know about this data. There's a basic notes reducer and an add note text action defined in the code editor. Finish the body finish the body of the add note text function so that it returns an action object. Okay. The object should include a type property. I'm just going to do this. Type, and the type property is add note, and also a text property, and the text property set to the note data. Okay. Cool. So they're going to call the add note text action creator, which has a type add note, and then within our switch here, we're going to add a case for add note, which will allow us to return the new state, which is going to be an object with a note in it. Is that what they want? Let's see. And it should return the text property on the incoming. Oh, gotcha. It should just return action.text. The incoming action is the new state. Okay, the action is dispatched on the bottom of the code. Once you're finished, run the code and watch the console. That's all it takes to send action-specific data to the store and use it when you update the store state. So I want to understand this better because it seems kind of weird. So it takes, I guess what I don't understand here is how the text actually goes into the state. Like there's no, I don't see anything that like binds these together. So when we call get state, I guess I just don't understand. I think what's happening and why I'm confused here is it's just putting this, like the state is just a string in this case, and the string is add note. I'm pretty sure that's all that's going on. So it's saying store.getState and the initial state is nothing. Or the state equals initial state, which is just this string. Then when we add note text to it, we're saying we're sending an action in, we hit the switch, and it says it's add note, and we return action.text. So we're returning what's in here. And now that we've done that, the store has been updated because whatever we return in here is actually going to be the state. I think I understand this now. And we are flying through this. We might actually not even need a part 2 because I feel like this is going pretty well. Use middleware to handle asynchronous actions. Never mind. Sounds really complicated. Hopefully it's not that bad. So far, these challenges have avoided discussing asynchronous actions, but they are an unavoidable part of web development. At some point, you'll need to call asynchronous endpoints in your Redux app, so how do you handle these types of requests? Redux provides middleware designed specifically for this purpose, called Redux Thunk middleware. Here's a brief description how to use this with Redux. To include Redux Thunk middleware, you pass it as an argument to Redux apply middleware. This statement is then provided as a second optional parameter to the create store function. Take a look at the code at the bottom of the editor to see this. Then to create an asynchronous action, you return a function in the action creator that takes a dispatch as an argument. So we do redux.apply middleware. We have the normal async reducer that has our switch for the store. And then we add in our second argument redux.apply middleware, and we use this Redux Thunk stuff. I'm not sure how this works yet. Write both dispatches in the handle async action creator. Where's that up here? Okay, write both dispatches in the action. Go to dispatch requesting data before the set timeout. The simulated. Okay, so requesting data goes here. I'm just calling this. Or does it want me to actually dispatch it? It looks like it actually wants me to dispatch it because that's what it says. So redux or store.dispatch. Store.dispatch and then sets the timeout and lets the data update, and then we will dispatch the new data. Store.dispatch received data, and is that it? Requesting data. Users, data.users. Async data reducer state. It takes the. Did they talk about this fetching stuff in here? Fetching true, fetching false. Requesting data. Okay. Well, it looks, I don't really know where the Redux thunk is coming into all of this. But it looks like with our regular, we just have a regular reducer that has these fetching properties on the return of the state. Default state being fetching is false and the user's array is empty. And then we have this timeout function to simulate a request to an API endpoint that returns users, or returns a data object with the user's property and an array of all of the users. And then that action actually makes it into this switch and then gets returned as the new state. I just don't understand like this middleware, like I don't fully understand what that's doing. Store.dispatch, because it's not called anywhere else, so it's just somehow, maybe what's happening, since we don't set the, like we never set the actual fetching property, so my guess is that what's happening is in Redux thunk, it's actually setting the fetching property to true when we request data. I just still think it's weird that there's no like, I don't know how, yeah, oh no, we're not, that's totally not true. Because we're just setting, when we say requesting data, we're actually setting fetching true here. We don't set it here because it's actually being set here. So I have no idea, honestly, what Redux thunk is doing here. I just don't see anything in here that talks about what this is going to do. So hopefully we'll clear that up in the next one. Maybe not. Write a counter with Redux. Now that you've learned the core principles of Redux, you've seen how to create actions and action creators, create a Redux store, dispatch your actions against the store, and design state updates with pure reducers. You've even seen how to manage complex state with reducer composition and handle asynchronous operations or actions. These examples are simplistic, but these concepts are the core principles of Redux. If you understand them well, you're ready to start building your own Redux app. The next challenges cover some of the details regarding state immutability, but first, here's a review of everything you've learned so far. In this lesson, you'll implement a simple counter with Redux from scratch. The basics are provided in the code editor, but you'll have to fill in the details. Use the names that are provided to define inc action and dec action. Okay, so we already know that this is going to be increment, and this is going to be decrement. So we knock that out. We need to define an inc action. So for this, we would return a function that has a type of increment. What am I doing wrong here? And down here we have a function that returns a type on decrement. And we'll define the redux.create store with our reducer, which is counter reducer. And the counter reducer will be a, oh man, I'm already forgetting. Define a counter reducer. Is it just a function that has a switch in it? It'll take state and the action, I think, and then take the action dot type and do a case for increment colon return state +1 and case decrement return state -1, and then default is return state. Okay, so we have increment, decrement, counter reducer. I think this is right. There's no default state, so I think I need to set state equals 0. And then I think that's it. So yeah, nice. Never mutate state. These final challenges describe several methods of enforcing a key principle of state immutability in Redux. A mutable state means that you never modify state directly. Instead, you return a new copy of the state. If you look at a snapshot, or if you took a snapshot of the state of a Redux app over time, you would see something like state 1, state 2, state 3, state 4, and so on, where each state may be similar to the last, but each is a distinct piece of data. This immutability, in fact, is what provides such features as time travel debugging that you may have heard about. I don't know if I've heard about that. Redux does not actively enforce state immutability in its store or reducers. That responsibility falls on the programmer. Fortunately, JavaScript, especially ES6, provides several useful tools you can use to enforce the immutability of your state, whether it's a string, number, array, or object. Note that strings and numbers are primitive values and are immutable by nature. In other words, 3 is always 3. You cannot change the value of the number 3. An array or object, however, is mutable. In practice, your state will probably consist of an array or object, as these are useful data structures for representing many types of information. There's a store and reducer in the code editor for managing to-do items. Finish writing the add to-do case in the reducer and append a new to-do to the state. There are a few ways to accomplish this with standard JavaScript or ES6. See if you can find a way to return a new array with the item from the action to-do append at the end. Okay. So let's see, we have the to-do. They're passing the to-do right into it, and we're going to go immutable action.type. Don't mutate the state. Okay. So we will return, return, we'll do a new object, and we will take the existing state, which will be to-dos, and spread that. Actually, since this is just an array, we can just do an array. So we'll spread state into our array, and then add our action.todo to the end of it. That should be fine, because we're creating a whole new array copied from the existing state, and we're not actually doing anything to the state. We're not doing like a pop or a push, array.push or anything like that. And they talk about it here. I don't know why. Yeah, I guess they probably just want to make sure that you saw what's going on here. So this, I think, is going to be literally what I just did. Let's just try it. Do not mutate the state. So you can literally just go to state. And action is to do. So we'll do action dot to do. Cool. Next challenge. Remove an item from the array. Time to practice removing items from the array. The spread operator can be used here as well. Other useful JavaScript methods include slice and concat. Okay, remove items. So we've got a state that starts with 6 items, 0 through 5, and then it takes an action, and we provide the index of the action. So then we will do, I think what we're going to do, since it's one item, is just, dang it, I keep always starting up here. I think we're just going to return a new array. I think we can actually just return state.slice, providing the action.index and the number of items we're going to remove, which is 1. Maybe not. Dispatching the remove item should remove items, let's see, from the state and should not mutate the state. Okay, so maybe I was under the impression, I thought slice was immutable. I didn't think it actually, I thought it provided a new state object. Might be mistaken about that. Let me go double check MDN on slice, because I thought it returned a copy. Yeah. Maybe I just was using it wrong though. Slice 2 and 4. So if I slice 2, it takes from to on. If I slice 2 and 4, it takes camel and duck. Oh, interesting. Okay, so they're wanting, I see. So they want to concatenate around it, it looks like. I would almost rather, like, filter, I feel like, might be a better option here than this, because I feel like this is extra, just like unnecessary work. So 1 through 5 goes bison, camel, duck, elephant. And so for us, I think what they want us to do, let's look at this concat method, but I think what they want us to do is they want us to slice before the index and after the index, and then concat it with this array.prototype.concat. But I think that's, I don't know if I like that at all, honestly. That's kind of stupid, but I'll try it because I have a feeling that's what they want. Concat, and then we do another state.slice and action index and state.length -1 to get the end of it, 0 to action index. Right? Huh, let's see. Action index, 0 through action index. Concat onto that is what I thought that was doing. State.slice action.index.length -1. Index state.length -1. Huh. See, I don't understand why it thinks that I'm doing anything. I'm not changing the state in this, as far as I know. Like, I thought these were supposed to be immutable functions. It's returning a copy of it. I don't think it's actually doing anything. Yeah, it even says the original array will not be modified. So I'm confused. Like, certainly I'm doing something wrong here. Maybe I should try, like, spreading these into an array instead of concatenating them. I don't think that should make any difference because it should have been the same. This should be functionally the same thing, and it's not making a difference. So what I wanted to do is do like a state.filter and then pass in the index. Oops. Because I feel like this is just as easy. And then return I does not equal the action.index. Like, that to me seems like a really easy solution. Oh, okay. I don't know why they were like saying I should use slice and concat, because they didn't even allow it. Copy an object with object.assign. Cool. Okay, so we have our default state, which is an object with some properties going on, and then we want to switch people to online. So we're going to say return. Can I just do like, are you able to update like in the middle of an assign? The object.assign. New object.assign. Here's an example. It's a new object which contains the properties that currently exist. So can I just do like return object.assign state and then pass in the property that I want to change, which is status equals online? Does that work? I don't know. I've never used this assign object.assign thing. Do I need to include like user, status online, friends, community? Is that what they want? No, okay. So maybe what I need to do, let's just try this, is I just can't imagine them saying like create another object equals. I just can't imagine them saying like make the object copy and then object dot. This just seems so dumb to me. Like there's got to be a better way to do this. Equals online and then return object. To me that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So perhaps I'm just missing this here's an example of passing. Oh, okay. Hang on 1 second. I'm a silly boy. This is how you do this. Yeah, okay. So you create, this first thing is just saying this is an object. And then you pass the state into it. I'm wondering now, like, could I say status equals online and just return this? I'm not sure if that's actually how that works. So far I've been wrong about everything I thought was going to work with this method. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that I don't like that. I wish there was like another, like I feel like there should be another way to like assign the object that's coming out of object.assign to have online as the status. Can I just, I don't know. One more thing to try, I guess. I don't think this will work, but dot, good grief, my computer's going slow. Don't know why. Let's see. So dot object.assign state dot status equals online. I don't think that's going to work. There's no way that's going to work. Yeah. All right. So you just have, I mean, it just looks like you have to just say object.assign, take the state, and you're just saying attach it to this object, or add all these properties in the state to this object, and then we'll set the status property to online. And then, wait a second, a useful tool takes a target object and source objects. Okay, yeah, any matching properties are overwritten by the source object. So even if we had a status in here, it's going to get overwritten. That's fine. Just thought it'd be cool. All right, now that was actually all of the Redux, it looks like. Ask me later. Which is pretty cool. I did not think it was going to be that fast. We're at 43 minutes, so that was pretty quick. I actually really do feel like that was an easier way to understand how Redux works. I think when I first started using it, I was actually trying to use it within React, which is actually going to be this next part here. In fact, we should just jump through this. It's only 43 minutes. Let's go jump through this really fast and see what's going on, because this is actually where I was getting really confused with Redux, is trying to use Redux in the context of React, where you already have states, and then there's like an additional update method for React that you have to use with React Redux, this React Redux package. So let's see what this reads. This series of challenges introduces how to use React or Redux with React. First, here's a review of some of the key principles of each technology. React is a view library that you provide with data, then it renders the view in an efficient, predictable way. Redux is a state management framework that you can use to simplify the management of your application state. Typically in a React Redux app, you create a single Redux store that manages the state of your entire app. Your React components subscribe to only the pieces of data in the store that are relevant to their role. Then you dispatch actions directly from React components, which then trigger store updates. Although React components can manage their own state locally, when you have a complex app, it's generally better to keep this app state in a single location with Redux. There are exceptions when individual components may have local state specific only to them. Finally, because Redux is not designed to work with React out of the box, you need to use the React Redux package. It provides a way for you to pass the Redux state and dispatch to your React components as props. Over the next few challenges, you'll create a simple React component which allows you to input new text messages. These are added to an array that displays in the view. This should be a nice review of what you learned in the React lessons. Next, you'll create a Redux store and actions that manage the state of the messages array. Finally, you'll use React Redux to connect the Redux store with your component, thereby extracting your local state into the Redux store. So for this exercise, we're starting with a display messages component, adding a constructor to this component and initializing it with a state that has two properties, input that's set to an empty string and messages that is set to an empty array. Okie doke. So we gotta create a constructor, takes props, and we put the props into the base constructor, the React.component with a super method, and then we create our state. State equals a new object, and that object gets set to input, which is an empty string, and messages, which is an empty array. And is that all we're doing for this one? Yep. Cool. Next up, we have the render method, have the component button element. When the input element changes, it should trigger a handle change method. Also, the input element should render the value of input that's in the component state. The button element should trigger a submit message method when it's clicked. Second, write these two methods. The handle change method should update the input with what the user is typing. The submit message method should concatenate the current message stored in input to the messages array in the local state and clear the value of the input. Finally, use the UL map to UL to map over the array of messages and render it to the screen as a list of li elements. All right, so let's go ahead and just declare all of our stuff in here. So we needed this.handleChange method, and we needed this.submitMessage method, and we're mapping, let's see, NUL render and input, button and UL here. Okay, input, button, oops, close and button, and a UL here. Cool. Type a new message. This.handleChange. Why is this mad? Type of global constructor. Okay, so I need to actually add these guys in. This.handleChange equals this.handleChange.bind to this. Pokemon. Come on. This dot submit message equals this dot submit message dot bind to this. Good grief. And I still don't understand why this is getting upset here. Handle change, submit message. What's going on here? Add the handle change. Why is this mad? I'm still in my component. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. Event and event.target.value and this dot set state input equals input colon event.target.value and close that off. Set state, and then down here we need to set our value equal to this.state.input, and we need to define the handle change, or I'm sorry, on change, to use the handle change, this.handle change, this.handle change. Although it seems like we're having, oh, I know why. We don't have to use this in this case. I always forget about that. So it knows because it's part of the class that it's going to be relating to this when we call it down here. This.handle change. So then submit message. Let's go ahead and put some words in there. Submit message. We let's see. We want to. What are we doing here? We're triggering an event that's going to update. It's going to add to the messages. So in this case, we're going to do a this.setState, and we're going to set messages to the array with all of our existing messages, spread it into it, or actually I can just do state.messages and then pass state into this and return that out, state.messages, and then add our new state, or our current state.input. Right? And then, so that submits it. That would add the message to the messages, and then we need to take our, we would need to take our this.state.messages.map, and we'll map through them and assign them to an li. Let's go ahead and do our little index for a key trick. So key equals, and then we do x plus I, and then closing li, and then we'll put in the x for the value. And these are, just so I don't make the same mistake I made earlier, looks like these are good. It's x directly in the messages. Okay, is there anything else we need to do? Submit, let's make sure this works. Test, submit. So, okay, so something's not working here. Submit, it's the fact that I don't have my on-click handler set up yet. Submit message. So now, dang it. Always forget to use this. Test, submit. Another message, submit. I'm gonna go ahead and also set the state of input to just back to not having anything in it, because I think it's annoying that I have to like delete everything. This out. Cool. All right, so let's run these tests. Perfect. All right, so now we're extracting our state logic to Redux. Now that we finished the React component, you need to move what the logic is performing locally in its state into Redux. This is the first step to connect the simple React app to Redux. The only functionality your app has is to add new messages from the user to an unordered list. The example is simple in order to demonstrate how React and Redux work together. First, define an action type add and set it to const add. Okay, so let's go ahead and set const add equals add, and then define action type add, then create an action creator. So add or function add message, which will return type. Hang on, I'm going to do it this way. I think this is a better way to do it. Const add message equals a arrow function that returns an object with type set to add. Cool. And then you need to pass this message to the action creator to include. Okay, so we'll have a message, and then we'll go to our message reducer, const message reducer, and that equals, reducer, and that equals a function that takes a state and an action, and that goes into a switch statement where we will take the action.type to establish what kind of message is coming in, case, and if it's add, we want to add to our state, which is going to start out as an empty array. We want to take our state and, we'll just return a new array with whatever messages we have in our state spread into it, and the action.message whenever my computer catches up. action.message, and then our default needs to return state. Good, and then do they want us to create a store yet? Looks like we don't have a store yet. Finally, create a Redux store and path the reducer. Okay, Redux, so const store equals Redux dot create, create store, I think, and message reducer goes in there. Good, good, okay. Use a provider to connect Redux to React. In the last challenge, you created a Redux store to handle the messages array and created an action for adding new messages. The next step is to provide React access to the Redux store and the actions it needs to dispatch updates. Okay, so we need to use the provider. Let's see, around our app. So where's our app in here? Man, my computer's been so slow today. So we already have a provider that's declared, have the app wrapper, and so we need to do the provider, and what kind of, so we have a store equals, store, right? And then closing provider, and then inside of here we do our app component, which just magically gets what's in the provider somehow. It's kind of weird. Do we already have a store? A constructor method. Oh, interesting. The only new piece is the app wrapper component at the bottom. Use this top level component to render the provider from React Redux and pass it. Okay, I wonder if I need to have a constructor for this, because I think we're not using, like, this outer method is not taking, doesn't have props or anything, and it's not setting state. So I don't think it needs to do that, but we'll see. So render, and then we will have a return, and inside that return we will place our provider. And is that all they want? No, what else is going on? App provider should render. So maybe we do need a constructor. Do we have a store already? Yeah, we have the store. Redux.create store. Component, use this top level component to render the provider from React Redux. React Redux is available as a global variable here. Do we already store React Redux? Maybe I just need to add the constructor here. Let's just be sure. Constructor props super props. Is that all at once? Build error. Open your console, learn more, inspect. Console. App is not defined. Oh. It's not? What is this? Oh, display messages. That's why. Good. Okay, I want to double check because I don't know if I don't think that actually was the problem. Yeah. So you don't need a constructor if you're not, like, doing stuff with state and props, it looks like. All right, the provider component allows you to provide state and dispatch to your React components, but you must specify exactly what state and actions you want. This way, you make sure that each component only has access to the state it needs. You accomplish this by creating two functions, map state to props and map dispatch to props. Okay, so const map state to props equals that guy, and then const map dispatch to props equals this guy. Behind the scenes, to React Redux uses store.subscribe method to implement map state to props. That's interesting. Okay, create a function. The function should take state as an argument, then return an object which maps that state to specific property names. Okay, these properties will become accessible to your component via props. Since the example keeps the entire state of the app in a single array, you can pass the entire state to your component. create a property messages in the object that's being returned and set it to state. What? I feel confused by this. Am I actually running this .set state, or am I just saying that, am I just returning an object like this and saying state, or saying messages equals state dot messages? I think that's what it wants. And then map do I need to map dispatch to props? Let's see. I don't see anything about mapping and dispatch to props yet. Map state to props should return an object. What is it doing? It's returning an object. I don't know why that's... Is it not returning an object? This should mean that I'm saying I want it to implicitly return an object. So I don't know what's up with that. Passing an array as state to the map should return this array assigned to the key of messages. What? Passing an array. Oh, okay. So do I just need that then? Is that what they want? Okay, that to me does not make any sense, because if the state, is the state always going to be an array then? Or maybe this is saying, I don't know. I don't know if state is coming from React in this case. Like, I know it's coming from right here for now, but I'm not sure if this is like showing that it's coming from React or if it's coming from Redux. All right, 50% done with this. Map dispatch to props. So I already had this written out, but whatever. Const map dispatch to props equals one of these guys. And what do they want here? For example, you have a login user action created that takes the username as its action payload. The object returned from map dispatch to props for this action creator would look something like this. Okay. Map dispatch prop. The code editor provides an action creator called add message. Write the function map that just takes a dispatch as an argument. Dispatch as an argument. And then returns an object. Okay. Let's see. The object should have the property submit new message set to the dispatch function, which takes a parameter for the new message to add. What? So, like that. I feel like I'm missing something here. So wait, function, they want this to be just a function. I see. I think I see what's going on here. So they want this to be a function that takes a message and then passes the add message action creator with the message passed into that function. So it's a little confusing because there's two functions that are going in here, but at the end of the day, we're just creating a function, assigning it to a submit new message property on the object that's coming out of this guy. So if I run tests, we're good. Nice, all right, and now we connect Redux to React. Now that you've written both the map state to props and the map dispatch to props functions, you can use them to map state and dispatch to the props of one of your React components. The connect method from React Redux can handle this task. This method takes two optional arguments, map state to props and map dispatch to props. They are optional because you may have a component that only needs access to state but doesn't need to dispatch any actions or vice versa. Use this method, pass in the functions as arguments, and immediately call the results with your component. The syntax is a little unusual and looks like this. Okay, so we have our connect, and we call connect, and we pass in our map state to props, and then immediately after it we pass in our map dispatch to props, and then they use a currying. They're using currying to allow us to pass in our actual component, which I think is going to be, is it presentational? Is that the one that we're pushing in? I think it's presentational. But but we're getting a build error. So let's take a look at what that build error says, because I think that might reveal some of what's going on here. Okay, so let's see. Did they say that the connected component is not defined? Where are we using connected component? Am I using that somewhere? Or is it just a generic thing saying that we don't have a connected component? Progress updates where possible. Cannot read property messages. Connected component. Okay, let's try. Hang on, I gotta get rid of that window because that's gonna drive me nuts. So let's pretend for a second that we're not gonna use presentational in a new. Connect this component to Redux with the connect method from the React Redux global object and call it immediately on the presentational component. Assign the result to a new const called connected component. I see. So they want us to say, they want us to take the connected component. That's connected. Oh, they actually want that capitalized. Connected component equals connect presentational. There you go. So now we have it rendering because whatever they're calling outside of all of this code is actually calling connected component, which is why we didn't see that. We saw that connected component error. Nice, 70% done. Okay, so, what's this? I don't want to use the dictionary right now. All right, so connecting Redux to the Messages app. Now that you understand how to use Connect to connect React to Redux, you can apply what you've learned to your React component that handles messages. In the last lesson, the component you connected to Redux, you can apply what you, let's see. In the last lesson, the component you connected to Redux was named presentational, and this wasn't arbitrary. This term generally refers to React components that are not directly connected to Redux. They are simply responsible for the presentation of the UI and do this as a function of the props they receive. By contrast, container components are connected to Redux. These are typically responsible for dispatching actions to the store and often pass store state to child components as props. Code Editor has all of the code you've written in this section so far. The only change is that the React component is renamed presentational. I see that. It's named presentational. Create a new component held in a constant called container that uses connect to connect the presentational component to Redux. Then in the app wrapper, render the React Redux provider component. Pass provider the Redux store as a prop and render container as a child. My mind is like getting blown by this for some reason. I don't know why that sounded so confusing. So define a container component here. Okay, so they want a new constant called container, and it's going to be equal to connect. And connect is going to use our presentational component, and then we are going to take, I would think we're going to take our two map state to props and map dispatch to props. And then below here, let's see, complete the return statement. So now we have an app wrapper, and it's going to render our container. And do we pass our store into our container? Is that what they're saying? Let's see. Presentational component should receive messages from the Redux store as a prop. Okay. Presentational component should render this page. Should return. So, am I saying store equals store here? I'm just guessing. Is that what they want? No. Okay. Then in the app wrapper, render the React Redux provider component. Oh, okay, gotcha. Provider. I see. And then close out the provider, and then render the presentational store and render container. Oh, gotcha, container. Okay, so we're not seeing anything yet, so it's probably not finished yet. Container that uses connect to connect presentational component to Redux. Then in the app wrapper, render the React Redux provider component. Pass provider the Redux store as a prop and render container as child. So we've got the store prop on there, and then we have the container as the child. This should be fine, but I'm wondering, if I missed a step because I'm not even seeing anything render out. So the container is connecting. We have our map set up. Let's check the console and just see if there's any obvious errors that are coming up from this. Method props is meant to be run on one node. 0 found instead. Huh. Method props is meant to be run on, it's not supported. Okay, so it's trying to look for props, it looks like, and not finding it. The app wrapper should render to the page. Good grief. What's going on? It's just like totally locked up. I might have to just refresh this guy. Oh, okay, good. I don't think it saves those states. So, okay, so we are rendering that. Presentational component should render to the page. Well, I would think it is because it's in our connect, and we're connecting our map state to props and our map dispatch to props, and our presentational is there. And our presentational takes a props object that has, let's see, where do we actually set anything in here? Submit message, current state. So what's interesting here to me is that we've got this presentational thing that is updating state within the presentational component, but it's not actually calling any of our reducer methods, it looks like. Like add message doesn't get called inside of here. It does get attached to submit new message. So maybe it looks like submit new message is actually, maybe what's happening is the submit new message is what's actually being called here. And then that is being backed up by the map dispatch to props here. That must be what's going on, because I'm not sure. Let's see, add message, submit. I just don't see submit new message being called anywhere. It seems like it should say submit new message, like in the actual, or it should say like this dot props dot submit new message or something. So it seems weird to me that they're not actually calling that in here. Let me make sure there's nothing else I'm missing here. Presentational, this wasn't arbitrary, typically responsible. Create a new component held in a constant called container that uses connect to connect the presentational components to Redux. Then in the app wrapper, render the React Redux provider, which is, I'm pretty sure what I'm doing. Oh, hang on one second. Dope, right there. I'm rendering, but I'm not putting my actual provider and stuff into my return statement. There we go. That's all it was. It was just stupidity on my part. There we go. So we've got that rendering. I'm going to type in a new message here. And let's see here. Test, test. Cool. Run those. And great. Awesome. All right. So 2 more challenges and then we're completed with this. Let's see. Extract the local state into Redux. You're almost done. Recall what that you wrote all the Redux code so that Redux could control the state management of your React Messages app. Now that Redux is connected, you need to extract the state management out of the presentational component and into Redux. Currently you have Redux connected, but you're handling the state locally within the presentational component. Gotcha. Let's see here. In the presentational component, first remove the messages property in the local state. These messages will be managed by Redux. Next, modify the submit message method so that it dispatches submit new message. So let's go ahead and walk through this really fast. Let's see. One second. Answer this. Okay, in the presentational component, first remove the messages property. So where are we doing this? In the presentational component, remove the messages property. Where are we actually using the messages property? Message. I don't see a messages property in the presentational component. Am I missing something? Oh, it's derp messages property in the local state. These messages will be managed by Redux. Perfect. Next, modify the submit message method so that it dispatches submit new message. Okay, so this is why this is what I was confused by the last time. So now we have submit message, and instead of calling this dot state or set state, we're actually going to call this dot, or what would it be, submit new message. And I'm not sure, like, submit new message is, I think I have to call this like on the props. Like I think submit new message actually lives on the props, so I think I have to do this dot props dot submit new message, and then I pass in this dot state dot input. Pretty sure that's how this works, and then that'll actually fire that event, fire that dispatch event. I ran this way too soon. This is not going to be done yet. So then submit new message from this dot props, yeah, it even says it right there, and pass in the current input from the local state as an argument. So I think we're good there. Because you remove messages from local state, remove the messages property from the call to this dot set state as well. Okay, oh, we do, I see, we do want to leave the state because we want to update the input to not have anything in it. Finally, modify the render method so that it maps over the messages received. So we've got the render method. We're reading from this dot state, and what we want to do is actually read from this dot props because we have a messages property there. So now let's make sure we're actually doing some stuff. Cool, so we're going into Redux now. There we go, nice. All right, so I think this is the very last challenge. Oh, good grief, are they gonna make us do all of this? Congratulations, you finished. There's one last item worth pointing out before you move on. Alternatively, let's see. There's one last item worth pointing out before you move on. Typically, you won't write React apps in a coder like this. This challenge gives you a glimpse of what syntax looks like if you're working with NPM and file system on your own machine. The code looks similar, except for the use of import statements. These pull in all the dependencies, blah, blah, blah. Finally, writing React in Redux code generally requires some configuration. This can get complicated quickly. If you are interested in experimenting on your own machine, the Create React app comes configured and ready to go. Alternatively, you can enable Babel as gotcha. You can enable Babel. Yeah, okay. So we'll do that in a different, probably in a different stream. But I'm going to go ahead and log this out because I think this is it. And after my slow computer finishes, 100% React and Redux, done. Awesome. So the next one that we'll be looking at on the next stream is this introduction. Let's see, we'll actually be doing these projects. So this will be interesting because this is just going to be like, it's not going to be like as straightforward as just going through and reading what they have to say. Like we'll have to go in and actually just code stuff from scratch and figure stuff out as we go. So that'll be fun. I'm actually really especially excited for this drum machine and this Pomodoro clock. I actually was just thinking about how I would like to do that, create a little Pomodoro clock just the other day. So this will be cool. We'll see how these go in some upcoming streams.